Hi, I'm Tom Groening, editor of the Working Waterfront newspaper and workingwaterfront.com. And this month in our series of ongoing Q&A interviews, we sat down with Philip Conkling, founder and president of the Island Institute. 30 years ago, Conkling and photographer Peter Ralston founded the Island Institute as a way of addressing the decline in Maine's island communities. Conkling has had a passionate concern for the fate of these communities, and in our interview he talks about the ideas and experiences that led to forming the nonprofit.
The story that I like to tell is a little bit, compresses a series of experiences into a shorter time frame. But basically, I was trained as a forest ecologist and wanted to work in the North Maine woods. But between my 2 years of forestry school, it was the 74-75 housing recession, no jobs in the woods, and I saw a little note on the forestry school bulletin board, collect baseline ecological data on 12 Maine islands. And I thought, well, that should be fun, but it couldn't be hard. And I got the job not because I knew anything about the islands, but because I could handle the logistics. There was no boat, there was just, you had to figure out a way to get on and off these islands, and a bunch of them were down in Washington County where I had been living, so I knew lobstermen and so forth that could get me around. The first island that I went to absolutely just was a transformative experience in that the more I thought about it, I just couldn't get it out of my mind. What happened was that I was there 3 days on the island. I had all of my field guides and a plant press and was making species lists and this, that, and the other thing. The lobsterman who was supposed to pick me up on the third day didn't come. It was, you know, just as they say down east, a dungeon thickness of fog. And this is before radar on, you know, that was routine on lobster boats. And so I had eaten all my food and packed my kit, and I was there on the beach. And what I realized after, you know, several hours, he's not coming. I went back, I pitched my tent, I, you know, went over my field notes and went to bed early so I wasn't thinking about eating so much. And the next morning, this was June, so the days were very long. I got up about 4 and everything was just completely still. I remember it just like it was yesterday. I figured I'd walk around the island, and as I was doing that, out of the fog, you know, when I was up on a cliff, out of the fog, literally at eye height, these a pair of bald eagles just burst out of the fog, and they were flying wingtip to wingtip, you know, using the edge of the island to navigate. And they saw me just, you know, almost as soon as I saw them, but it was, you know, they were only 20 or 30 feet away because I was right on the edge of the island. They were using the edge of the island. And as they swooped away, when they saw me, I felt the wind off of their wingtips, and you know, the hair on the back of my neck just stood up. I mean, it was just a really remarkable experience. And then later on that day, I mean, it started to clear up, and I figured I'd go one more time do a transect across the middle of the island where it had been very dense, and I didn't get a really good sense of it. And in the middle of this thicket, overgrown thicket, I found a foundation. And that, you know, those two experiences sort of encapsulated what was so remarkable to me about the islands, that they were both wild and yet they had this inhabited past. And when I went back ashore and asked around town in the town office and so forth, who had lived out there and who were those people? Nobody knew. It was as if, you know, history had just disappeared before our eyes. And it took years and years to find out actually who had lived out there, but I kept asking questions, and in fact, the rest of that summer, everywhere I went, there were signs of some kind of human occupation of or use of the islands. And instead of finding all of the islands the same, they were all subtly different because what had happened in the past had set them on a different ecological trajectory. So the uses of the past were indexed in the landscape. And it was just it was just kind of a revelatory experience. And I ended up working in the woods, and then came back to the islands because Hurricane Island, Outward Bound, hired me to do ecological surveys of the 200 islands that they had permission to use. And again, everywhere I went, there were human stories, and they were just fascinating to try to uncover. So and I thought, back then, this was in the late 70s, you could go anywhere on the islands. You didn't, there was this incredibly wonderful but subtle sense of permissive use. And I said, this can't last. This is going to change. This is too good to be like it, to stay like this. And that was essentially, when I started talking to people about it, people said, there are a bunch of different island organizations, but they're all about, preservation. Nobody is talking about how humans have used and can continue to derive economic uses in a sustainable fashion from the islands. And that basically was the central idea behind starting the Institute.